Hey there, Trailblazers, I hope you guys are all doing well. So today we've got a pretty interesting piece of Honkai Star Rail news to talk about, and this is one of those leaks that kind of just showed up out of nowhere and immediately got everyone's attention. So apparently, according to a new post that just surfaced, in the upcoming version 4.3 patch, we might get part 2 of the currently ongoing Fate/Stay Night collaboration. Yup. We're basically going to get a part 2 of the original HSR X Fate collaboration with 2 brand new playable characters from the Fate series. These characters are said to be Gilgamesh and Rin Tosaka, respectively. Now, I'm not even gonna lie, if this ends up being real, this is easily one of the biggest things we've seen for the game in a long time. But before we get too deep into this, just keep in mind that this is still early leak information. Nothing here is officially confirmed, and things can absolutely change. So as always, take everything with a grain of salt. Now, starting with the leak itself. The post specifically mentions that version 4.3 will include a Fate/Stay Night collab, and more importantly, it directly names Gilgamesh and Rin Tosaka as the playable units. And honestly, just those 2 names alone already tell us a lot about what they might be going for with this collaboration. Let's start with Gilgamesh. If you know anything about his character, then you already know he's not the type of unit that's going to be subtle. He's usually portrayed as extremely dominant, overwhelming, and honestly just oppressive in terms of power. So translating that into Honkai Star Rail, it would make the most sense for him to be designed as a very high-impact damage dealer. But not just a standard DPS. If they actually stay true to his identity, there's a good chance his kit could revolve around constant pressure, multiple hit instances, or even some kind of mechanic where he just floods the battlefield with attacks. Because that's kind of his whole thing, overwhelming enemies with sheer force rather than precision. And if they get that right, he could end up being one of those characters that just feels powerful the moment you use him. Now on the other side, you've got Rin Tosaka. And this is where things get a bit more interesting because her design could go in a completely different direction. Rin Tosaka isn't really about overwhelming force in the same way Gilgamesh is. She's much more calculated, controlled, and methodical. So if that translates into gameplay, there's a strong chance she ends up being either a support or some kind of hybrid unit. Maybe she provides buffs, maybe she enables certain mechanics, or maybe she sets up damage in a way that other characters can take advantage of. But at the same time, they could also flip expectations and make her a damage dealer that focuses more on precision or setup rather than raw output. And honestly, having both of these characters in the same patch would create a really interesting contrast in playstyles. One being all about overwhelming pressure, and the other being more about control and setup. Now, something else that's really important to think about here is what this means for version 4.3 as a whole. Because if this collaboration is real, then it's not just going to be a small side edition. Collabs like this are usually treated as major events. That means there's a very good chance we'd see dedicated story content, themed events, and possibly even unique mechanics tied specifically to these characters. And that alone would make version 4.3 feel very different compared to a normal patch. Another thing that players should probably start thinking about right now is how these characters might be handled in terms of availability. Because historically, collaboration units in gacha games don't always follow the same rules as regular characters. Sometimes they don't get reruns very often, and in some cases, they might not come back at all for a long time. So if Gilgamesh and Rin Tosaka really are coming in version 4.3, this could end up being one of those situations where you either pull for them during that window or risk missing out. And that's exactly the kind of thing that makes planning your stellar jades even more important. Now, looking at the bigger picture, this leak also says a lot about where Honkai Star Rail could be heading. Up until now, the game has been very focused on building its own universe and expanding its original cast. But bringing in a collaboration like Fate/Stay Night would be a huge shift. Because once you open that door, it means there's potential for even more collaborations in the future. And that could completely change how the game evolves over time. Of course, we still need to be careful here. Because again, this is all based on early leak information. There's always a chance that things get changed, delayed, or even scrapped entirely. But even with that in mind, this is definitely one of those leaks that's worth paying attention to. Because if it turns out to be true, version 4.3 could end up being one of the most memorable updates the game has had so far. And honestly, I'm really curious to see how they would actually implement something like this if it does happen. That's pretty much everything I wanted to go over in this video. If you found this helpful, feel free to leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to stay up to date with all the latest Honkai Star Rail news and leaks. And with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video.